Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Pre-TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Department of Rescue and Recovery, written by viceywicey. Most civilized governments in the Galactic Council had a sole Union Department of Rescue and Recovery office located on their core worlds. Granted, not all of these offices were in the best kept condition. It was customary for the host species to set up an operating budget for the humans to match it. Not all governments saw the humans as a financially responsible investment, but threw a few million credits here and there just to maintain diplomatic relations with the humans. Funding aside, the doors to any of the 1,000 or so departments of rescue and recovery offices were always open somehow. It didn't matter how many hours there were in the hosting planet's day-night cycle, or if there were holidays to be celebrated. Any being could walk through the doors and always find a human, tired perhaps, but disarmingly baring his or her teeth in what humans considered to be a gesture of hospitality and friendliness. No one ever wanted to have to pay a visit to the Department of Rescue and Recovery. It's a visit that anyone from any species dreaded. It was a visit born of a sense of hopelessness. It was this very hopelessness that found Verisk standing at the base of the stairs leading up to a drab grey building at least 1,000 cycles behind in retrofits. Verisk clenched his pectoral arms to his sides in self-comfort. His back arms clutched his tablet computer that had filled with all the information he managed to gather. His eyes trembled as he stared up at the sliding doors that didn't close completely. After taking a few deep breaths, he made his way up the stairs and inside. "Hi," a high-pitched voice floated across the lobby, echoing against the hard stone interior. Verisk nearly jumped at the sound as his brain tried to process the concepts of a home without any glass sprawled across the floors and vegetation creeping across the walls. "Hello," Verisk said, trying his best to conceal his nervousness. "Oh, you don't have a translator yet. Give me a second," the human said, still baring its teeth. It reached beneath the counter it stood behind and returned with a small piece of equipment roughly the size of a pond-skipping stone. It sat on one counter and pressed a button, and then gestured for Verisk to approach the counter. "Can you understand me?" it said. "Yes." "Excellent. My name is Melanie Ronan. I'm a female. You may call me Mel if you'd like. May I know your name, species, and title if you claim one?" Melanie said. "Verisk Larai. I'm a Carlian," Verisk said softly. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. Larai," Melanie said. "I'm not highborn," Verisk said. "Ah, it is very nice to meet you, Verisk. How can I help you today?" Melanie said. Verisk paused, unsure where to start. He thought to maybe lie, give the appearance that he knew more. Maybe that might better convince the humans to take his case, or perhaps honesty would endear them to his plight. Instead, words tumbled out of his mouth in no specific order, as the emotions pounding in his chest overwhelmed his reason. My partner and child have gone missing. She was supposed to arrive by registered transport 2 weeks ago. I have not heard anything from the company that chartered the passenger liner. Nothing on the waves. It was a small ship, only 400 souls on board. Too small of an incident for my government to open an official inquiry. I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go," Verisk said, near tears, as the human expression went. Melanie stopped baring her teeth, the corners of her mouth turning down, her face contorted into a look Verisk could only describe as displeasure, like she'd eaten an unripe guarani fruit. "I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I'm glad you decided to come to us. Wait just a moment. I'll have a case officer come to see you shortly. Would you like anything while you wait?" Melanie asked. I don't understand," Verisk whispered. "Refreshment? No, thank you," Verisk said. "Let me get the case officer," Melanie said. She raised her hand to her head and tapped something in her ear. "Captain Kim to lobby, please." Verisk simply stood at the corner, unsure as to how he could make himself feel more comfortable in such a place. The past few days he had been a nervous wreck, to the point that comfort seemed as foreign as a concept as seeking help from humans. The human Melanie attempted to make polite conversation. Merrisk gave little more than terse answers here and there. He didn't have the energy or state of mind to engage in any meaningful way. A few minutes passed before he heard the echoes of footfalls down the corridor. Verisk turned towards the sound. Captain Kin was much taller than Melanie. His face was sharp features and his hair was dark-colored below his head covering, which he wore at an angle. He did not have the same pleasantness that Melanie had, but Verisk found an odd sense of ease in Captain Kim's businesslike appearance. The human walked with purpose, his entire posture rigid, almost mechanical in his measured stride and the slight flex of his shoulders. As Captain Kin got close enough to make eye contact with Verisk, Captain Kim bared his teeth, though his display was fleeting, as if his face was unaccustomed to such movement. Kim tapped an attachment on his wrist before speaking. "You must be Verisk. My name is Captain Wuhan Kim. I am commanding officer of this office. Why don't you follow me?" Verisk followed Wuhan from where he had come from. Wuhan turned the corner and opened the door, holding it open for Verisk to enter. The interior immediately filled with Verisk with a small sense of peace. Lush grasses covered the floor, parting gently under hoof. Vibrant plants, adorned with their spring petals, painted vivid colors across the walls and brushstrokes Verisk hardly imagined possible. Warmth filled the entire space, seeping through Verisk's fur and into his very bones. "Paid for this myself," Wuhan, seeing Verisk admire the interior, said. "I figured you'd feel a little more at home in here than in my office. How are you holding up?" "Pardon?" "Sorry. These translators aren't great with our idioms. How are you feeling? Have you been eating and sleeping? We have a Colorian physician on staff if you require medical attention," Wuhan said. Verisk was more inclined to ask how the captain of such a poorly maintained office could afford such things, but could not bring himself to ask. "A little," Verisk lied. Wuhan frowned, but didn't press further. "That's good. I know it's hard. You might not believe me when I say this, but I've been in your position before. It's important to eat and keep up your strength," Wuhan said. "Is it okay if I record our conversation? We're a bit understaffed, so I don't have any administrative personnel to sit in on this and do a full contextual translation." "Yes," Verisk answered. Wuhan nodded, tapping his wrist attachment twice. Verisk recounted what he had found from his investigations, halting at first. He showed Wuhan the missing ship's planned flight path and how close it came to the Radaran belt as a fuel-saving measure. He showed how he had tracked its refueling stops and the comm echoes picked up from the nav beacons close to where all contact to and from the ship had ceased. He brought up the dossiers that he had scraped together on the pirates, slavers, and gangs that operated in and around the space his wife and child's ship had been last reported being. All the while, as Verisk unfolded his story, Wuhan looked on quietly. His eyes bore an intense focus as he studied Verisk's notes, space charts, beacon timestamps, and celestial body shifts. Verisk couldn't even be sure Wuhan processed a tenth of what Verisk had to show. But Verisk kept talking, if only because after all the running about he had done trying to get someone to listen to him, someone finally took the time to do so. "How many planetary cycles ago was this?" Wuhan interjected. 16. Verisk felt that all three of his hearts sink at his answer. "I see. I am required by the department rules to inform you that given the amount of time that has elapsed, the chances of locating this vessel are slim," Wuhan said. "I thought," Verisk began. Wuhan held up a hand. "My apologies. Allow me to clarify. Disclosing the probability of success does not mean that we don't intend on taking on the case. Our bureaucracies just require that I make it clear to you that, again, the chances are slim. It's just a formality," Wuhan said reassuringly. "I understand," Verisk said. "Do you have any family in the system to stay with?" Wuhan asked. "No. I moved to the system for work. It took me some time to save the credits for my wife and child to join me," Verisk said. "Are you at home by yourself then?" "Yes." "Ah." Wuhan tapped his wrist attachment. "Mel, can you have facilities prepare a guest room?" "Yes, for one." I don't understand." Verisk tensed his back muscles and flared his nostrils in a gesture of anxiety. "I realize that this must be a very strange experience for you and that our customs are difficult to understand. I assure you this is all normal procedure," When we accept a case, it's typical for us to ask that individual opening the case to stay on the premises for a few cycles while we confirm the particulars. As I'm sure you can imagine, coordinating any search and rescue efforts comes with certain challenges and expenses. I'm just doing my due diligence, as is required by my supervisory body, Wuhan said. If I don't stay, will you refuse to take the case? No. It could muddy up logistics, but we'll manage regardless. We are, of course, not going to force you to stay. Our facilities are not the best, but we will do everything to make you comfortable. Speaking for myself, if I were in your position, the last place I would want to be is sitting at home, ruminating, Wuhan said. Also, this way I can give you the up-to-date developments without having to send a courier to notify you. Okay, Verisk murmured. As if on cue, the office door swung open. Melanie stood in the doorway, her teeth concealed, but the corners of her mouth upturned. Melanie will show you to your accommodations. I have some calls to make to finalize the case review process. I will notify you of the case's status as soon as I receive confirmation. I appreciate that this is a very tough time for you. While I can't make any promises, I can assure you that we will leave no stone unturned. What is this expression? Verisk asked. It means that we'll do everything in our power to find the ship your wife and child are on, Wuhan said. Verisk just stood there, at a loss for what to say or what to do. His very thought of having been so utterly consumed with trying to find his wife and child, with trying to find someone to help him, and now he had found that help in the humans. He felt only disbelief. He turned to follow Melanie, but was stopped by a question surfacing through the patchwork of emotions running their course through him. You agreed. Why would you agree? What is in it for you? Verisk asked. It's my job, Wuhan smiled without baring his teeth. It's what I'm paid to do. You are not under Carlian thrall. You have no obligation to help us. Yet you are here, in this office, on a foreign world, no doubt away from your family. All this to help strangers in a strange place, Verisk said. Verisk's eyes locked on Wuhan's, but Wuhan was looking past him, then a gaze empty before focusing again suddenly. Around 15 years ago, I was serving as a Navy pilot on one of our more developed outposts. 120 billion souls on a world, 85% terraformed. We had atmosphere, magnetosphere, and geological and tectonic activity. I was stationed on one of the Advanced Expedition's old orbital stations when an earthquake hit the southern hemisphere. You understand this word, earthquake? Wuhan said. Yes. Wuhan continued recounting how he disobeyed orders to launch, violated protocol to enter the atmosphere using the planet's gravity to accelerate him close to the maximum entry speed. Verisk listened, aghast as Wuhan recalled how he had been disciplined for his disobeying orders. Such madness, Verisk said. I suppose it could be seen that way, but my squadron saved 47 people. Receiving a demotion and having to rectify my flight status and climb back up to lieutenant was worth it, though, Wuhan said. 47 in the context of millions, Verisk said. Better than none. The cost would not have been worth the lives. Were these people you saved of significance to your kind, royal board or political leaders? No, just people. I don't understand, Verisk said. Because I would want the same done for me. If I would want the same done for me, how could I do any less? Wuhan said. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Drexzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.